We've got some win total numbers out for the SEC and the Dogs. We're going to get you to Memorial Day. Stay tuned with me here. Georgia, their line is 10.5 for the season. Now that's a 12-game season. You don't get more than that. What do you think about that? We've also got some other ones here: Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn. It's Dean Legge from Dog Post. Seeing you once again. Are you going over to dogpost.com? We've had a ton of traffic over there lately. We appreciate everyone going there and seeing what's coming up. A huge June in the recruiting world. But let's focus on this real quick. I'm going to go backwards in order. Vanderbilt with a win total line of 3 for the season. Then Texas A&M. Well, I'm not going to go in line. I'm going to go backwards by name. So Vanderbilt, then Texas A&M at 9.5, playing over in the West. And Texas A&M has a halfway challenging schedule this year because I think they play out of conference at Colorado at the beginning of the season. Don't expect them to lose that game. Then again, I don't, you never know. That's certainly a tough side of the division with LSU, Auburn, Alabama, teams that Texas A&M has not exactly conquered a ton in their time. Tennessee at 6, Carolina at 4, Ole Miss at 7.5, Missouri at 7, Mississippi State at 5.5. LSU at 8.5. Got some real questions at LSU at quarterback, at the athletic department level as well. Kentucky 6.5. Georgia at 10.5. Florida 9. Auburn 7. Arkansas at 5.5, which is an interesting one. And you got Alabama at 11.5. Alabama doesn't really play. Alabama doesn't really play a challenging non-conference game. So that is certainly something that one should pay attention to. If you want to say that, Miami is a challenging game, the Dome is going to be full of Alabama fans. But anyway, let's get back to Georgia. You got 10.5. Basically, everyone in Vegas is saying, hey, you're going to lose a game, which is, not abnormal by any stretch for any SEC team, let alone Georgia. And when you just look at who they're playing, Clemson, Florida, those two stick out for sure. I think a dark horse one could certainly be the road game at Auburn. We'll just see. At Tennessee, you host Arkansas. But, if you're asking me, and I'm going to go through it right now. If you're asking me which of these games Georgia loses, it's either going to be Florida or Clemson. I know in saying that it will getting my Larry Munson on it may be a different game. Nobody saw the South Carolina game in 2019 coming. This is a team that had beaten top 10 Notre Dame at home. It was strange, and then went on to beat some really good teams later that year in Texas A&M, the Gators, etc. So you got Clemson. I think that's a toss-up game. I think that's whether you make your money on your 10.5, because if you beat Clemson, there's just not a lot to discuss after that. You're probably going to win 10 more games, if not 11. UAB, that should be a blowout. South Carolina at home, that should be an easy win. Nashville for Vanderbilt, that should be an easy win. Arkansas, I don't know about easy, but that's a game where Georgia's going to be like a 17-point favorite. That game's in Athens. Arkansas replacing a quarterback. Auburn, brand new coach. They needed to do some changing at Auburn. That's a big game. That game's at Auburn. Georgia should win. The line for that is, these early season lines are so scattered sometimes. I've seen a 6-point difference in some lines for the Auburn game. So it's anywhere from 4.5 to 10. So Georgia should beat Auburn. Kentucky and Athens, that's a game Georgia should win. But, that's a tough. It is difficult to play Kentucky. They are a physical, tough team. Stoops has really got them as a program. Kentucky is one of the most physical teams in the league, and I'm including Alabama, Georgia, and LSU in that. You got a week off, and then the Gators. Georgia should beat Florida. This is not like Clemson where Georgia's going to be a slight underdog, or maybe it's a toss-up. Georgia's going to be favored against the Gators. Are they going to be favored by 8? Are they going to be favored by 10? Could it be 11? Would it be 6? I think it's going to be a touchdown or more. Georgia should win that game. Missouri at home in Athens. Maybe that's the game that you got to watch because Missouri supposedly can score points. But the fact of the matter is that they just shouldn't be on the field with the Dogs in terms of skill level. Tennessee and Knoxville, it's going to be tough for Tennessee to beat Georgia. South Carolina and Tennessee are in the same universe to me in terms of their ability to beat the Dogs. It's not an impossibility for any one game to go a particular way. It's just that that's not the game you'd pick for Georgia to get upset. Charleston Southern, no shot. And then you got a game in Atlanta with the Jackets. That one, I don't see Tech beating Georgia, but there are enough landmines that, particularly the Clemson game, that I get it. And I understand why it's not, 11.5. I mean, you look at Alabama and their situation. I mean, they are 11.5. Okay, that is a significant number. I mean, that means you have to be perfect. I mean, they were perfect last year. You look at these games. I mean, Miami and Atlanta. That should be a win. Mercer, Florida, and Gainesville. I don't see it, but whatever. Southern Miss in Tuscaloosa, Ole Miss in Tuscaloosa, Texas A&M at College Station. Certainly a game you'd check. You that's the one you're going to be like, Mississippi State and Starkville should be a win. Tennessee, LSU, New Mexico State, Arkansas, and then at Auburn. I will give Alabama the Auburn game. When you look at this, I'm just seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 home games for Alabama. The game at State is a 60-minute drive. They're playing in Atlanta in a neutral site game. This is a really good setup for Alabama. Honestly, Georgia's got a really good setup, but all their big games are away. You got Clemson away, Auburn away, Florida away, and Tech and Tennessee are away. If you want to call those big games, the rivalry games are all on the road. They're not in Athens. You got Auburn, Tech, and Florida. Obviously, is never in Athens, but you got Tech and Auburn. Those games are on the road. That is one thing I think over time you're going to see. Georgia's got to figure out when it can get Auburn to swap. Auburn needs to pay back that game, and Auburn and Tech need to get on opposite years. You don't need to be hosting Auburn and Tech the same year or traveling there. But for the Dogs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 home games. That's it. Jacksonville and Charlotte. I don't get my feelings hurt like a lot of people about Jacksonville. I think Jacksonville's got to do a much better job of hosting that game. They do not do as good a job as they should. When you're someone like me who's traveled around and been to neutral sites, we're going to see how Charlotte does this year. And I would put them as the favorite to be a better atmosphere in terms of around the stadium. What I mean by that is ease of getting in and out of the game. Jacksonville's got a long way to go. I can't believe I'm saying that. I've been down there for like 20 plus years. I cannot believe I'm saying that, but it's a tough game to get in and out of, and it's not a great setup. I guess I'll put it like that. Although Charlotte for the Belk Bowl in 2014 was about as bad a damn disaster as anything outside of a Clemson home game. So those are rough. But Georgia, you're playing in Charlotte, Athens, Nashville, Auburn, Jacksonville, Knoxville, and Atlanta. You're playing. I don't think they're playing in a state that doesn't touch Georgia. That's good because sometimes you get that with Kentucky, Missouri in the same year. That's brutal. But I don't. I like this schedule for Georgia. The 10.5, I think that's about right. I think if you were to say 11, 11.5 to me would be crazy because that would mean you're trying to say that they're going to win every game they play. You're saying that they'll do that. That they'll do it is a different thing than saying that they'll do it. I think this is completely reasonable. I think that you're basically saying they'll lose to Clemson or Florida or maybe Auburn, something like that. I do want to look at this Arkansas thing just real quick. Stick with me, and you're going to see why they're at 5.5. They play Rice in Fayetteville, and probably this thing will come down to the Texas game in Fayetteville. So they play 3 games off the bat in Fayetteville, and then they go to Arlington to play A&M. So you should beat Rice for sure. You should beat Georgia Southern for sure. But 3 of their first 5 games are against Texas, Texas A&M, and Georgia. So those are tough. So let's just say you're 2-3 coming to Ole Miss. You should probably lose to Ole Miss. Auburn and Fayetteville, I'll give you a loss. But then you got Pine Bluff gets you to 3. Mississippi State should get you to 4. LSU, I don't know. And then Alabama and Missouri. So maybe 5.5 is about right. But it's going to come down to, do they beat Ole Miss? Do they beat Texas? Will Texas have their gear together? I don't know. You look at the Gators. Florida never plays out of Florida. And then this year you see they only play 4 games out of the state, even though they have road games out of conference. So they're going to play Florida Atlantic, win, South Florida, win, Alabama loss, Tennessee win, 3-1, 4-1 Kentucky, 5-1 Vandy. LSU, should they win that game? I don't know. 5-2. Georgia 5-3. South Carolina 6-3. Stanford 7-3. Missouri 8-3. Florida State 9-3. Missouri and Columbia, Missouri. Better watch that one because that's going to be pretty cold out there. That's a late season game. The Gators don't typically play out there late. The only watch it game, there's one specific watch it game for me with Georgia, which is the Auburn game over there. I think that's a game you better watch. But globally speaking here, besides the oddity of like Missouri playing at Boston College, South Carolina playing at East Carolina, what is that about? When I look at the SEC schedule, there are a lot of curious, interesting games. You have games in Denver, Charlotte, Arlington, Jacksonville. Atlanta. If you want to, I don't know about every single week, but a lot of weeks. If you want to go watch an SEC team play, not at an SEC venue, you can actually do that probably 6 times this year. So it's an interesting dynamic. What that has to do with wins and losses in the league, I'll leave up to you. I don't know if you take Georgia's over there because, you're asking them to run the table after a Clemson game if they lose that game. And that's going to be tough to do. They have done that a lot. I mean, you think about the 19 season, the 18 season, they couldn't lose again after losing to LSU and then a year later South Carolina. And they did it. They did not do that in 2020, but because they lost to Alabama and they lost to the Gators. They're going to need to figure out how to win against Florida and Clemson. It's easier said than done. What do you think? Tell me down below. Do you think Georgia should be, would you take the over or the under on 10.5 games? Good question. Let's talk about it more on Dog Post. We'll see you over on the website.